Masechet Zevaḥim Daf Ayin Gimel. The Mishnah taught that if a shor haniskal, for example, or something else that is prohibited for anyone to get benefit from, gets mixed up with many korbanot, Zevaḥim, that are consecrated, kosher, valid korbanot, the result is that even 1 in 10,000, they all have to be left to die. We cannot offer any of them because there's one shor haniskal in there which you cannot offer, cannot get benefit from, and so they all become prohibited. We wondered, why don't we say batel? Batel berov, batel besomething. Why don't we say it gets nullified at some number? Why even 1 in 10,000? So we offered one answer, that it could be Rabbi Meir in the interpretation of Resh Lakish, who said that something that is often numerated, that you sell it by number, that is considered significant. Each thing in itself is significant, and therefore animals, although sometimes they're sold by the herd, but usually they are sold by number, and therefore each one is significant and is not batel. So we have one answer for Resh Lakish. However, Rabbi Yochanan's wording of Rabbi Meir is et shedarko limanot, which means only if it's exclusively enumerated, and animals are not exclusively numerated. Therefore, according to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Meir is not the author of our Mishnah, and so now we're wondering who is the author of our Mishnah. And we began an answer. Rav Papa said, it's the Tana of the following source, it's a Tosefta in Masechet Terumot, regarding the dried figs, a litra of dried figs. And he said, Kol davar sheyesh bo minyan, afilu b'drabanan labatil, v'kol sheken b'deoraita. One of the opinions in the following baraita is going to be extremely stringent, which is just what we're looking for, and says, anything that is sometimes counted, even if the prohibition is only midrabanan, if sometimes it's counted, it is not nullified, and that certainly will apply to animals where the shor haniskal is actually deoraita, so certainly it will not be nullified. That is the author of our Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yochanan. So now let's look at the details of this case and the machloket about how to rule on it. The Tanya, litra kitziot shederasa al pi igul ve'eno yodea be'ezo igul derasa. If you have a litra is the equivalent of a modern pound. In fact, the modern pound, when you write 10 pounds, the abbreviation is LB, which comes from Latin libra, which comes from litra, the Greek litra. So actually, our pound is directly connected to this litra. So literally it means a pound of dried figs. What they would do is they would take figs like this and dry them out so that they stay good for a long time, and they would press them into a round, a circular vessel. And so you put lots of figs in there, and now there's many pounds of figs in this vessel, and on top you put 1 pound of figs that are terumah. The rest of the figs in there are permitted. The ones that terumah are prohibited to a non-kohen. And so now you have this litra of kitziot that you pressed on in this vessel, but there's many vessels. Maybe there's 50, 100, 200 vessels, and you don't know which vessel got the terumah on it and which did not. Now, figs are required in terumah only midrabanan. Midoraita, you have to take terumah from wheat, grapes, and olives. But figs are required midrabanan. So therefore, the status and prohibition that come along with terumah for these figs is only midrabanan. Okay, nevertheless, this is going to cause a prohibition, as we'll see. And this is case number 1. The other cases are the same as this one. It's just different types of vessels. So one is the regular vessel vessel that you use for pressing figs. Al pi chavit ve'eno yodeh be'ezo chavit derasa. Al pi kaveret ve'eno yodeh be'ezo kaveret derasa. Or if you pressed it on top of a barrel that had other figs in it, or on top of a straw basket. And so you use the straw basket to press all the figs in. And so most of the figs in there are permitted figs. But the top layer that you just put on is teruma. However, the problem is that there are many baskets and many barrels with figs on top. And we don't know which one has the teruma figs on top and which ones are entirely permitted figs. So what do we do? Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Meir says that there's a machloket. We're going to see a machloket between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, and there's two opinions about what Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua are. So Rabbi Meir is going to be the more lenient version of these two opinions. Rabbi Eliezer Omer ineta elionot ki'ilu hen pedudot v'atachtonot ma'alot eta elionot. Let's just pick barrels. It's the same for all the other two cases. So we look at all of the tops of each of the barrels as if they are separate pieces, not one unit. And we look at the lower layers and we count them also. Now this is a huge leniency because we know that the teruma is not in the lower layers. We know that someone put it on the top layer. So really you should count only the top layers and see if there's 100 top layers. You need 100 to 1 to nullify teruma. However, now we don't have that. Instead, we have we don't take just the top, but the entire thing. So you take how many pounds in this? Let's say you have a very big barrel with 110 pounds of figs in it, and you have the teruma figs on top. But you don't know which of the barrels it is. But all together, with all the figs, is more than 100 pounds, even if all the barrels all together. So we count all of the pounds of figs, and if it's more than 100 to 1, then it's batel. Now this is unusual that you would count things that you know shouldn't be counted, because you know the teruma is only on top, so you should really count only the tops. But because it's midrabanan, so we are more lenient according to the Rabbi Eliezer. This is the most lenient opinion. There'll be 1 in 100 for all of the figs, both that's on top and that's on throughout the bottom of the barrel. Rabbi Yoshua Omer im yesh me'apumin ya'alu im lav apumin asurin v'shulayim mutarin. Rabbi Yoshua says what we would expect, which is that if there are 100 openings of barrels, then that's batel, because there's 101 barrels here. I put the teruma on one of them. Okay, but there's 101 barrels. I don't know which one it is, so they're all permitted. But if there's only 90 barrels, then all of the tops are prohibited, but the rest of it is permitted. Just take off the top layer, the top 1 pound in each of the barrels, and that is no good, but the rest of it will be permitted. That's Rabbi Yoshua according to Rabbi Meir. Now there's another version of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Eliezer Omer, im yesh sham me'a pumin ya'alu v'im lav ha'pumin asurin. Rabbi Yehuda is going to shift everything one step more stringent. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer takes the opinion that we just said in the name of Rabbi Yoshua is actually Rabbi Eliezer. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer is the more lenient opinion, and he says what the answer that we would expect, which is that you take the top layer of each of the barrels, and to see if there are 100 barrels with top layers or more, then that's batel. But if it's not, if it's less, then all of the tops are prohibited. And then we have Rabbi Yoshua Omer, afilu yesh sham shelosha me'ot pumin lo ya'alu. This is the most stringent opinion. Rabbi Yoshua, he says, it doesn't matter, even if there's 300 openings of barrels, it is not going to be batel. We see why. We're going to see why, because Rabbi Yoshua thinks that something that is counted even sometimes, and usually you don't sell things by the pound of figs. Rather, you sell a whole barrel of figs. But there are times once in a while that you'll sell a barrel of figs. And so therefore Rabbi Yoshua says that's a davar shebeminyan, and therefore it's not batel even in 1,000. We continue the baraita, and then we'll get to the point. Derasa be'igul ve'eno yodea be'ezeh makom be'igul derasa, o lisfona o lidroma devrei hakol ya'alu. If he did not put this teruma, pound, on top, but rather he put it somewhere in the vessel, but he doesn't know where in the vessel he pressed it in. It could be on the north side, it could be on the south side, it could be anywhere inside. Well, then everybody will agree that as long as there's 1 in 100 all together of all the figs, it's permitted, because here, even Rabbi Yoshua would say, it's not considered its own entity anymore. The figs, they're all pressed together, and since it gets all mixed up, it's somewhere in the middle, so then it loses its identity as a pound of figs. It's just part of the whole, and therefore it is batel. And everybody would agree it's not a devar shebeminyan anymore in that case. But we're going back to the case where it is on top, and therefore you see that according to Rabbi Yehuda's version of Rabbi Yehoshua, this is something, as we said in the introduction to this answer, that this is called davar sheyesh bo minyan, something that is even sometimes counted. Even if it were to Rabbanan, it would not be batel, and certainly if it's, in our case, it's mideoraita. And so therefore, we have identified an author, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says it can't be Rabbi Meir. Okay, it's not Rabbi Meir, but it is the Rabbi Yehoshua in the interpretation of Rabbi Yehuda, who says even something that is sometimes counted is called davar shebeminyan and is not batel. And so that would apply to the shor sheniskal, that is going to, that even though it's sometimes counted and sometimes by the herd, but that's the fact that sometimes it's counted is sufficient to make it davar shebeminyan, and that's why it's not batel, even 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000. Okay, that's all one answer of Rav Papa. One more answer. Rav Asher Amad, afilu tema de Rabbanan. Ba'alech chayim chashive v'la bat le. Rav Asher says, no, actually you could even say Rabbanan, the one they argued on the Rabbi Meir. The Rabbanan above are the ones that said, no, there's only 6 things, or according to Rabbi Akiva, there's only 7 things that are important enough that they're not batel, but everything else is batel. Now, animals were not on this list, so we thought that according to Chachamim, animals are not so important, they are batel. However, now according to Rav Asher, says, oh, actually, animals are also very important because they're each significant items in and of themselves. It's a whole being, and therefore they are not batel. It's the fact that it's not on the list is because that list was only talking about fruits and vegetables, but indeed, that rabbis would agree that animals are considered significant on their own, and therefore this Mishnah could be according to Chachamim, and that one animal that's prohibited, that gets mixed up with many other animals, indeed, all of them would be prohibited. V'nimshoch v'nikrab chad minayhu. Now, another question back in the Mishnah. We have this herd, a bunch of animals. They all got mixed up. One is prohibited, short haniskal, and the other ones are permitted, zevaḥim. Here's the question. Why don't we take one and sacrifice that one? And then we'll keep doing that. We'll take one more, and if we isolate it, then it should be prohibited because of the rule, v'nema kol de parish meruba parish. There's a rule that anything that is separated from the group, we assume that it follows the majority of that group. So it's true. When they're all together, okay, we don't know which is which. We have to assume that they're all prohibited. But if one of them leaves, we'll get one of them to leave the group. Oh, look, it's separated from the group. What's the status of this one item? Well, we can assume that it's part of the majority of permitted items, and we could sacrifice that. And then you can keep doing that one by one. We ask, Nimshoch ha hava la kavua. What do you mean? If you draw it out from the fixed place that it's in, well, that's considered not something that's separated, but rather something that is in the fixed place. It's right there, and you're just drawing it out. V'chol kavua kemechsa al mechsa dameh. We have another rule that anything that's fixed in place, we consider it half-half. The classic case is there's 9 butchers that are kosher, and one is not kosher. And so now, if you have a piece of meat that you find in the street, You don't know which butcher it came from, you can assume that it came from the kosher one, because there's 9 out of 10 are kosher, and that left the store. We don't know how it got here, it just is here. However, if I go into a store and I buy meat and I leave, and I don't remember which store did I go to, in that case the meat is prohibited because I went to the store, and that's called kavua. So now we have a case here where, well, what is this like? Is it like the meat in the street, or is it like going into a store? So right now we say it's like going into a store because it was all part of it. I'm the one that went and got one animal and took it out from the fixed place. So this is like something from a fixed place. It didn't get there, it didn't come on its own. And so this would be like something that's a fixed place and should be just 50-50, which is prohibited. There's no bitul. Ela nichbeshinhu denaidi venema kol de parish meruba parish. Oh, why don't we push all of the animals? Let them all scatter. And then we'll say, oh, look, they're all scattered. There is no fixed place of the majority where they are, because they're all scattered. And then we could take any one of them and slaughter it. And then we could take another one and slaughter it. And we could apply that rule. Amar Rava gezerah shema yavo asara kohanim bebat achat v'yikrebu. Rava said, you're right. From the letter of the law, you could do that, and we would apply. It's called the parish, miruba parish. Since it left the place that it was, we assume that's part of the majority, and it would be prohibited. And each one of them would be prohibited if you do it one at a time. The problem is that it's possible that 10 Kohanim will take all of these animals, let's say there's 10 animals, and each one will take it at the same time and and sacrifice it all simultaneously. Now you can't do it simultaneously, because then for sure one of these is a Shor HaNiskal, and you're doing it all at the same time. And you can't say, oh, it's separated from the rest of them, and therefore this one we could say is part of the majority, and the next one you can only apply that rule if it's one at a time. But if you do them all together, then that's already like kavua. Is definitely one that's prohibited that you're doing right at that time. One of the rabbis challenged Rava about the fact that he says that the problem is that they're going to be sacrificed at the same time. That's what he's worried about. So he says, well, according to that, what you mean is that at the time that they took each animal, okay, they took each animal one at a time, and so at that time they would technically be permitted. But then you're worried that they're going to then slaughter it and then bring it in a basin. The Megisa is one of the basins that they carry the limbs in, or Rashi says that they carry the blood in. So from that time and on, it will be prohibited because they're all going to offer it at exactly the same time. They're going to all offer the blood or offer the limbs at exactly the same time. That's what you're worried about? But that can't be. You can't tell me that if they took each animal separately, at separate times. One guy took one, then the other guy took the second. And so now, at the time that he took it, it's separated from the rest of them and therefore permitted. So if each one was taken separately, then each one has to be permitted. And you can't tell me that after it's permitted, because you follow the majority, it's batel, because you took one, so we assume from the majority. Then afterwards, because they're in the bowls at the same time, later on, it's going to recombine to be one unit, one kavua, and now it's going to be prohibited again? That doesn't make any sense. So rather, we update Rava's answer. Mishum shema yavo asara kohanim bebat achat v'yikchu. We're not worried that the kohanim are going to take them one by one and sacrifice them at the same time. Once they're permitted, they're going to be permitted. Rather, worried that the 10 kohanim are going to come and take them all at the same time. It's only permitted if you take one by one, because then you could say, for each one that has separated, I'm taking this one, it's separated from the majority. Majority are permitted, this one is permitted. The second guy can reason the same thing, and so on. That's all. That's good. But if they all take it simultaneously, then you can argue that each one is batel concerning compared to the rest. So that's Rava's question. We answer it. Ba'asara kohanim bebat achat mi efshar. Wait, if you have 10 different kohanim, is it possible that they're going to and we scattered the animals, remember? So we scattered them all. They're all running in different places. 10 Kohanim are going to grab onto an animal precisely at the same exact moment. That's impossible. It's going to be 1 second before, half a second after, and so we don't have to worry about that. Ela amar Rava mishum kavua. Rather, Rava explains the reason why we prohibit in this case is because it might be kavua. It's only permitted in a case where you first scatter them, and then you can apply the rule called the parish. If since it's separated from where it was because you scattered them all, then we say, it's we follow the majority. And you're right. If you did that every time, then it would be permitted. However, we're afraid that in some cases people will not realize that. They will forget to scatter them, and they're going to leave them in the same place. And then they're going to use this thing and take one from the pen that they're in and take another one from the pen that they're in. But then that's kavua, and kavua you consider half and half. And therefore, we say all of them are prohibited. That explains the ruling in our Mishnah. That's why they are all going to be prohibited. Amar Rava, hashta da amri Rabbanan la nakriv, I nakriv la medaseh. Rava has a follow-up law. Now that the rabbi said that you cannot sacrifice any of the animals, again, we're talking about a shor haniskal or some other prohibited animal gets mixed up with permitted animals, all of them become no good for sacrificing. Now, even though this is only midrabanan, because it's only a gezerah, really you could scatter them and take one by one, but we're afraid that if we allow that, then it might come to a situation when they are in place, and that's kavua, and then that'll be a problem. So the prohibition to sacrifice these animals one by one is only midrabanan. Nevertheless, once the rabbis say that you cannot sacrifice these animals, if you do sacrifice them, they are not acceptable, which is quite an astounding thing, that the Derabanan law can affect the Deoraita outcome. Even though Mideoraita, these animals, you could say batel, the prohibited animals batel, and they are sacrificable, so really Mideoraita should be okay, but because the rabbi said, gezerah, what's a problem? Therefore they become prohibited, they become nidche, they're pushed away, meaning they rejected, and that's it, they're permanently rejected. Iti Rav Huna bar Yehuda l'Rava chatat shenit arba be'ola ve'ola shenit arba be'chatat afilu achat beribo yamutu kulan. Now we're going to challenge this statement of Rava from a Mishnah in Masechet Kinim. So Rav Huna bar Yehuda challenges Rava. The Mishnah teaches that if you have a bird that's a korban hatat and it gets mixed up with another bird that was designated to be a korban olah, or a bird that should be an olah gets mixed up with a hatat, even 1 in 10,000, they all must die because we don't know which is which. And for each one, if it's a korban hatat, then it should be offered on top. If it's a korban olah, it should be on top. If it's korban hatat, it should be offered below the red line. And so now we don't know which is which. There's different ways, different procedures for korban olah and korban hatat, and you can't just switch one for the other. And therefore, they all must die, even 1 in 10,000. When is that law true? If the Kohen asks the Bet Din, what should I do? You tell him, no, they all have to be left to die. אבל בכהן שאין נמלח, עשה למעלה מכסה כשר ומכסה פסול, למטה מכסה כשר ומכסה פסול, אחת למטה ואחת למעלה שניהם פסולות, שאני אומר, חטאת כרבה למעלה ועולה כרבה למטה. However, if the Kohen did not ask the question, he didn't ask the rabbis, he didn't ask the court, and he just went ahead, even though it's prohibited to offer them, because you're not allowed to offer a korban that is not proper, it's an invalid korban, so even though he shouldn't do that, and he's violating this law by offering things in the wrong way, nevertheless, what if he already did it? V'di'avad, now he did it. If he put them all on top, well then half of them are valid, the half that were korban olah birds, and half of them, assuming there was 50-50, however many it was, and half of them, whichever ones that were hatat, are going to be pasul. If he did them all on the bottom, then half of them are kasher, the ones that were hatat are okay, and the ones that's supposed to be korban olah will be pasul. If it was 2 of them, and he did one above and one below, then they're both no good. good, because we have to worry that perhaps the chatat was above and the olah was placed below, and therefore they're both no good. So the people that have to bring them, let's say it's a woman has to bring it because she gave birth, they have to bring more birds in order to replace those, because we have to assume that they're wrong. But if it's all above and all below, then it's okay. But now we have a problem here, because in this case, when they get mixed up, it's prohibited lecha techila. It's prohibited to offer them. So according to Rava's reasoning, once the rabbis say that you can't offer it, and if you would ask the rabbi, they would say you can't offer these. So these are things that were nidche. These are birds that the rabbis would say, if you ask them, they're no good. So therefore, they should be, if you did sacrifice them b'di avad, according to Rava, they should be no good. No matter what, even if you put it on top, on bottom, even if you put it in the right place. According to Rava, once the rabbis say you should not offer lecha techila, then even b'di'avad they're no good. But in this Mishnah Masechet Kinim, although the rabbis, if you ask them, would say don't offer them, but b'di'avad, if you do offer them, then it's okay. Why? Rava, how can you explain it? And Rava can answer, Ela ha keman damar ba'alei chayim nidchin, ha damar ba'alei chayim ena nidchin. Rather, we can answer that Rava's opinion is following the view that says that Baalei Chayim, living animals, once they are rejected, they're permanently rejected. And even if it's only midrabanan, the rabbi said you can't use it, that's it. You can never bring it again, and if you do bring it, it's invalid. Whereas the Mishnah is following a different opinion that says that live animals are not permanently rejected, even though right now, if you ask, no, you can't offer any of these. They're all just a mixture of chatat and olah, and you can't offer them. But once you do it, then the reason why you can't do it no longer applies, because now you're already violated and you put the ones in the wrong place. But now the ones that were in the right place, well, they were fine. So even though it was rejected and prohibited to put it on, now that you did it, it's okay. So we're following two different opinions, and Rava is following the more stringent opinion. But now we ask a question about that, because if the animal is slaughtered already, dead animals, everyone agrees, meaning both of these opinions, the machloket is only when the animal is alive. But if the animal is dead, everybody agrees that once it's rejected, it is permanently rejected. And yet, in the following Mishnah, which is Mishnah coming up in this Masechet, it says that even though it was rejected, because of a mixture, nevertheless, if you offer it, it's still okay. That's going to be a challenge against Rava. Here's the case, Utanan. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, Im karav harosh shel ahad mehem, yikrevu kol harashim. Rabbi Eliezer says, if you have a olah offering, and you already slaughtered it, and you already cut it up into pieces, now there's one prohibited one, a blemished burnt offering, and other ones are unblemished, and they all got mixed together. So, lecha techila, you can't offer any of them onto the mizbeach, because one of these is from an animal that had a mum. However, so therefore it's nidche. So really, according to what we just said, everyone should agree that they're all rejected and they shouldn't be acceptable. However, Rabbi Eliezer teaches that, let's say, without realizing, one of the Kohanim takes the head of one of the heads of these animals and puts it on the Mizbeach. In that case, we can assume that that was the prohibited one, and since it was already put up there, then we take all the other ones and we can put them all up there, because now it's not the mixture anymore, prohibited mixture. Now we assume the prohibited one is there and the rest are permitted, and we put them all up. So you see that even if you say that things that are rejected should be rejected, but when it comes to something that's prohibited because of a mixture, and now the prohibited item in the mixture doesn't matter anymore, then they're all permitted, and therefore Rava should agree that in his case, in our Mishnah, it should be permitted. And so the answer is Hu damar kechanan hamisri. That Mishnah, where the Eliezer is stating that's following a minority opinion of Chanan, a sage from Egypt, the Tanya. Chanan Misri Omer afilu dam bakos mevi habero zaveg lo. He said that when you have the two seirim on Yom Kippur, You have one that's supposed to go to Azazel. That one has to be alive when you take the other one, the one that's going to be LaHashem, that's sacrificed. You sacrifice that one that's LaHashem, and you take the blood and you put it in a cup, and you're supposed to sprinkle it on the Mizbeach. And you have to do all that, the sprinkling on the Mizbeach of the Seir LaHashem, while the Seir LaAzazel is still alive. Okay, that's if you do it in the proper way. What happens if the Seir LaAzazel gets a heart attack and dies suddenly while the Kohen is doing the other one? He has it in the cup, the blood is in the cup, but he didn't sprinkle it yet. So now he can't sprinkle it right then because there is no corresponding Seir LaAzazel that's alive. So what do? You say, wait here, right? Just hold on to that blood, and then they have to go get another Sa'ir. They have to join it together, pick it with a lottery. Well, this is Azazel. Okay, now we have a new Azazel one. And so now that you have a new Azazel one, then you can go back to that blood that he had before and continue to do it. And here's the Chidush. Even though it's rejected during that time, from the time that the Azazel, the original one, gets a heart attack and dies, until they go and they choose a new one, that blood is rejected. Nevertheless, even though it was rejected, once you get a new one, now it's permitted again. So we see that according to Hanan HaMitzri, even when it comes to dead animals, or dead parts of animals, and blood included, even though it's rejected, now it can be used again. That is a minority opinion, and that Mishnah is following that minority opinion. But Rava doesn't have to follow that minority opinion. He follows the majority opinion that says that once something is rejected, then that's it. It becomes permanently rejected, and that's the reason why that since in this case the rabbi said the case is one short in his kal joins together, gets mixed up with many korbanot that are permitted, and now they're all joined together. The rabbi said, listen, we're afraid they're not going to scatter them, they're all going to take them at the same time, they're going to be together and it's going to take them, and that's like mechsa, and that's a prohibited mixture, and therefore midrabanan you can't offer any of them. And Rava is following the opinion that says once it's prohibited, then it becomes permanently prohibited, and therefore, even if you do it b'di'avad, still it does not fulfill the obligation of the owner, and you would have to bring a new one. Baruch Adonai le'olam, amen ve'amen.